Rocket TikTok today at log.rocket. See you on TikTok.
Hello and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it free at logrocket.com. I'm Noel, and today I'm joined by Elian Van Cutsem, leader of dev relations at React Bricks, and also an Astro maintainer, here to talk about making the web weird again.
Yay!
How's it going?
Doing good.
Let's jump right in. Let's talk about the weird web. Why do you think this is like such a, seldom talked about topic? I feel like there's a lot in the web that the web can do that we just don't end up taking advantage of.
Yeah. Well, to put it simple, I think we work and live in a very fast-paced environment. As developers, we constantly have to find solutions to problems and bugs or implement new features. And we're very busy doing that. So we don't have a lot of time, or we don't want to spend the night just having fun on the web, let's say, or making the web weird, because we're already exhausted and we probably want to keep some time offline instead of online. That makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think we do take our work a little bit too seriously sometimes. But yeah, I'm here to change that. At least I hope.
It does feel like as more and more serious, I guess to use your word, stuff has shifted online, or the ratio of just like weird fun stuff seems to have dropped immensely.
Yeah, the thing is, we just have a lot on our hands. Like, we have to keep in touch with GDPR laws. We have to keep in touch with accessibility and people with maybe other issues that we don't know. So it's very hard for us to make sure that a website, whatever website that might be, is totally acceptable everywhere. And that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, since we're so busy doing that, we take some things a little bit too serious.
Yeah, accessibility is an interesting one. I want to loop in like security and privacy and some of this stuff later too, because I also have a suspicion that like a lot of that original web weirdness has now been patched out and removed for fear of there's like legal fears and all this stuff going on. But do you think, just to frame this first, do you think that there is a more healthy approach to development and finding joy in web dev again?
It's hard. It's definitely hard, because for me, yeah, there's definitely like joy that we have to find, because if we're doing our job at least 8-7-ish hours a day, then we need to make it fun at least an hour or two of our day. And we need to have fun, because otherwise you'll just be going to your job, doing your job, going back home, and you're not really satisfied in a way with whatever you have done. Maybe you are, but it's so much more fun if you can actually make it fun as well. And I think that's what it was about for me. Like, I wanted to have more fun in my day job, and I wanted to try some stuff without actually losing the feeling that I wasn't really productive. So I think that's a little bit of what it's about for me.
Have there been any like APIs or anything in particular that have walked that line where it feels like this is like a fun, novel, like enjoyable thing to be working on, but it also is more productive?
Yeah, there is a lot of them. It's a very thin double-edged sword in a way, because the battery API, it's a really good API. It's really interesting. Let me say it like that. It's really interesting because what it does is it reads out your battery. It's giving, if it's charging, yes or no, Boolean wise, it's true or false, what percentage is your battery, and maybe how long the battery can run. It's very interesting because it's very useful to, maybe your battery is running out very fast, so we can restrict the number of animations we're running on the website, the number of images being loaded up. We can detect all that and use that in a useful way. But also we can start misusing that, in the sense of, what if I have a web shop running and I see that you only have 5 minutes of battery? Maybe I can start pushing you some sales like, hey, this is going to run out in maybe 5 minutes, just like your battery. So you better be charging. Hey, do you need a charger? Maybe you can buy a charger for 20% off. And then you get to the dark side of all those APIs, which is what my talk as well is about, in a sense. It's about walking that fine line of what we can use it for and where it's useful, but also we can misuse it because it's JavaScript. JavaScript is such an open platform, just like the browser is, that we can actually use those variables and put them into CSS variables or path variables, and suddenly your website will react to your environment of your browser, which is an interesting idea to me. Like, for instance, the battery API, it is useful because, for instance, at React Bricks, the company I work for at this moment, we have used it to give you a notification like, hey, your battery is running out. Maybe you should save your progress on your page so you don't lose all of your edits and everything. So it can be useful. The question is then, is this like a security risk? Because you're giving your personal data somewhere on the internet, which is a little bit scary in a way. And actually, that's why it's not working I think, in Firefox. They just
they had support.
Yeah.
And they pulled it because they were like,
Exactly.
people are using it for tracking.
Exactly.
And it was removed from newer versions.
It's super interesting. And I love to play with that like fine line between useful, useless, and whatever you can use it for dark side, but also on the good side.
Is there a process you're going through that kind of spurs some of this stuff on? I think I have a hunch a lot of people see these kinds of things like the battery API, for example, and like, oh yeah, that is cool. That'd be fun to play with. But I would never have even thought to have looked for these funky APIs or tried this. Is there something that keeps you curious and engaged in these quirky APIs?
Yeah, in a way it does, because I want to learn about the platform. I always say in my talks, like, use the platform. So I want to know about the platform, and the browser supports so many different stuff that I wanted to explore a little bit more. And hey, what does this API actually look like? And then I started playing with the idea of, what if I start using all the browser APIs that exist that I don't know of and I want to learn? Let me start to use them in a weird way so I can have fun, but still learn all the way through. So I guess that's my process in a way.
I'm not sure what your guys' like team structure and such looks like internally, but is there a way to get organizational or team buy-in on some of these things that you found to be effective? Because like you said, there's this weighing of, we've got features spec'd out, we've got to add more basic CRUD stuff for XYZ to support.
It's hard because, let's say, as a business, you want to ship features. You do not want to play around too much because you lose time, and time is money. We all know that. And that does make sense. But in a sense, yeah, I think it's very important as a company that your employees or whoever you have in your company, you keep them stimulated and you keep them happy with actually shipping some of the weird stuff, or giving them the time to experiment with weird stuff that might actually be useful. What I typically say is that, yeah, sure, like, I build weird stuff with weird APIs, but actually they might, like on the lower level, resemble something that is useful. I had one of these ideas the other day, which was basically, what if you have an input field, basic chat app, whatever, but it replaces the words that you type with, let's say, with memes. For instance, you type something and it will find the appropriate meme and send the meme instead of what you're saying. Or maybe it translates to emojis, like iPhones already do that, or Android phones as well. That is useful in a sense and useless in another sense. But what if, for instance, this podcast, it's transcripted and suddenly you can input it in that same field, it will generate memes. That's not useful. But what we can do is, what if we suddenly want to make diagrams or something for a presentation maybe? Then it can search the internet or the web, find something that's really useful or something that will describe the words we're saying, and then suddenly you have maybe a useful feature. So it's always resembling in some way. It's always something useful. And if I didn't build that weird experiment first, I might not even have thought on how that feature could have been implemented that way.
Are there particular spaces where this kind of the weird quirkiness of the web as a platform still seems to be thriving, like, more than others?
It's definitely like hackathons and stuff still happen all the time. So people definitely still do it. People build, let me say, like silly things all the time. There is so many plugins for VS Code, for instance, where you have like a pet somewhere, or maybe like at Astro, we have the Houston theme, and Houston will float around. And whenever you have an error in your code base, it will be sad. And whenever your code runs fine, it has a smiley face. That is a quirky, maybe easy thing to implement, but it's so much fun. And building that builds your brand. It builds the fun. Like, maybe it's also like a weekend project that's just a lot of fun. So hackathons and community is very much a thing here.
There's an interesting kind of dichotomy here where it feels like a lot of that early weird quirkiness was very like steeped in the internet culture at the time, which was like young white dudes, right? Like just doing weird. It was very like stratified, and that was the thing. Do you think that kind of, as the web has become more socially ubiquitous, everyone's involved, do you think that has chipped away at this like universal sense of this, we'll just do like quirky, weird humor and that'll just be the thing? Or do you think it is mainly that kind of like productivity shift that's
Yeah,
caused
I
this.
think that's it. We have to keep track of so many things. We have to learn, like, for instance, next it's rebuilding its code base. Now you have the app router instead of the pages router, or the other way around, whatever. So you have to keep being busy with learning the actual stuff you're using at work. So why are you learning to build other less useful things? I think that's the problem in a way, but also not a problem. I think it makes a lot of sense. Like we probably want to spend more time on accessibility than building actually things that are not accessible at all and just some weird, quirky JavaScript website that nobody's going to use anyway. So yeah.
I do feel like some of that energy that before would have been like, let's just build something fun, has been shifted towards, oh, I should do an accessibility pass here,
Yeah.
right? That is probably a more, I don't know, productive use of my time. Do you think that there's like a healthy balance there, or have you been able to, my vocabulary is failing me, but find any places where those can like coincide and be working on accessibility, but also via some cool new feature or API that you've not seen before?
Good question. Actually, I have no idea. I think it's really hard.
I think so too. I know that there is some variables and stuff that are exposed now. That's, oh, like this is like a screen reader is looking at me versus something else. And I know that there have been advances there. But I think it's also that same kind of privacy thing also then comes into it. And it's how much of this should we be exposing, and like different organizations have
the
different
thing
motives
is,
here.
the web is just a very regulated platform now, and that makes a lot of sense because everybody and everything runs on their browser. Like even we are recording this podcast through a browser, so we have to make sure that everything keeps running everywhere. It's the same reason why JavaScript doesn't change a lot in a sense, because it has to be supported almost everywhere on every device across all different platforms. So yeah, it's very hard for sure.
I'm chewing on like the battery API because I think that's an interesting one. Do you think that like the battery API, like you said, there are use cases I think for it, like we could come up with like display stuff changes or the way like good valid behaviors that are useful. But again, it seems like there is this kind of like we're walking a line, and some browser groups have determined that it's not worth exposing that for fear of the security risk. And I think both sides are like valid. But I'm curious, do you think that it is maybe indicative of a failure of the web, that thing is like that layer is exposed to JavaScript in a way that can be abused? Is there a better way something like this could have been implemented, wherein like the user's browser can do things differently if the battery's getting lower? Like the system says, hey, disable animations, right? As a developer in CSS, you declare like only do this animation if browser or if battery levels high.
It already exists in a way. Like you have preferred modes, right? Like you have preferred dark mode, for instance, which is one of them. Like color schemes is one of them. And then you have now battery that doesn't really have that use case, but it definitely exists. Like you can limit animations already on the website. But one thing that I would reimagine, like whenever we implement the battery API, there is no permission whatsoever. There is no permission layer. Whereas everything else, if you want to read MIDI, USBs, whatever on the web, you always have to give permission, but not with the battery API, which is really interesting. Like, why not just implement that as well? It's not too hard to do for a browser. And then people that want to opt out can opt out. And there is no worries in that. So yeah, that's something that I would change.
I think that is an interesting one too. I think that there's probably been people who have done much more thorough discussions of this and considered it much more. But I think this is, I think, the one failure that I think we've made with all of these cookie tracking settings and things, where like on every website you get prompted to ask for it. And every time that happens, I'm just like, this should just be a browser. Like the browser should just I should just configure this on my browser and be able to give a list of domains to my browser. These ones have permission. And if so, they don't need to prompt.
Sadly,
I understand why it didn't. There's legal reasons and all this stuff. It didn't happen. But I think that is a failure of the organizations that exist. The thread didn't follow all the way through to the tech in a way that could have been very satisfying.
I totally agree. Like with the cookie settings and everything, it's getting even worse because now I think it was very much in Italy that a lot of websites have found like a backdoor in the legal laws where you can actually tell people that, hey, if you want to deny cookies, you can, but then you'll have to pay. And that's a thing as well. Like, what? No, that's not how the platform is supposed to be. But yeah, sadly, it's very true. Like, it should be a browser setting. Deny all, always, or deny only this domain, or apply only this to that. Sure.
Yeah, because I think how it's so much less painful when a website like prompts you for mic or camera access. It's like, yep, it's always the same. The browser does it. If you wanted to have your browser pre-configured to always allow, theoretically, this is possible.
That is possible. Like the worst instance of that is, for instance, the notifications. Like whenever
yeah.
you're browsing like a website with whatever, like news typically does it, it always wants to send you notifications. I really don't want that. What's happening? Deny all, always. It's a weird platform in that sense.
Yeah. But I think that on the other side, there's cases where it's worked very well. And I think what we don't think about is like audio is you can't just play audio when landing on a site. Usually in most browsers, it needs to be a user-driven event. And browsers have implemented this pretty well. No new tabs or pop-ups opening that'll blaringly loud at you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's very interesting ways that stuff could be implemented.
There is definitely a lot happening in the good spectrum of this as well. Like, for instance, the prefers no animations or something like that. It's a very good step in the right direction. I think it just could be even better. But of course, it's all standardized and everything, which makes sense. But it takes a lot of time to change something, which sometimes comes and bites you in the ass.
And I think that like these, as we said, like the web is slower now. People are like, everything's more considerate or considered maybe, and everything's thought over a little bit more. I guess that said, are there any weird kind of APIs or just projects, experiments, anything you've seen recently or like stuff that's on the horizon that you're particularly excited for?
Most of the things are, of course, already implemented somewhere, but I'm looking more into WebHID for now because I want to do a lot of more stuff with it. Like in my demos that I gave at React Day Berlin and everything, it was already cool, but I think I can do way more with it. Like for instance, controlling animations with the PlayStation controller or something. That looks like a lot of fun to me. So I definitely want to dive more into that. And there is definitely way more APIs, of course.
Yeah. Can you catch listeners up on what WebHID is?
WebHID is basically human interface devices. Basically, an USB device, whatever that might be. Like, for instance, my audio interface that's recording audio right now is WebHID enabled, which means that I can connect to it through that API and I can intercept whatever button press occurs. And then I can attach an event to it and trigger an event with it. So on the stage, what I did, for instance, was with this web audio interface, whenever I pushed a button to put a channel on or off, I could change colors on my website, or maybe just the R in RGB, or maybe the opacity, whatever. Yeah, you can do a lot with it. But I think it also, let me clarify, it has a lot of good use cases as well. Like I'm misusing it as what my talk is about and making the web weird and everything. But like WebHID is a great thing to have. Like accessibility wise, it's a great thing to have, and we need it in more browsers.
I agree. I think there's like controller support is pretty like video game control. That seems to be like the big human interface and like things like screen readers and stuff like that. Like we have pretty good support there. But I do, it's always like consistent, cool APIs that are like easy to bring in like weird input devices with knobs and buttons and all this stuff. Like,
that's also one thing I want to do and get more into is web Bluetooth. Like it supports it exists. It's not really good because Bluetooth itself, it's not amazing in a sense. But yeah, I have some fun ideas with an Arduino or something and then attaching it. And we'll see in my next talk if I actually can make it. But yeah, would love to play around with that as well.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted that like the limitations, take it for granted is the wrong term, but there's like the keyboard and mouse are somewhat limited input devices. And then everything's like trying to map to these things. And it's just, sometimes we want like a different whole layer. It's like a joystick is very different, right?
It's actually pretty funny to get that because exactly that is what I did in one of my talks, which was using WebMIDI for exactly that. MIDI is super wide. It has 16 channels and a lot of buttons. Like literally, you can have any key you want. So I attached the keyboard and I played around on the keyboard and intercepted those notes. And you can do something with that. For instance, playing video whenever you press your MIDI clock, or maybe you want to alter something or trigger something. Like for instance, on my computer, I can open up Google Meet with one press on my Akai keyboard. So you can totally do something like that.
Very cool. It sounds like you have a couple components of this, pieces like fun APIs that you're very tuned into and keeping an eye on and you think are cool. Is there anything you'd advise other devs to find find the things that interest them and like can keep their ear to the ground on?
What really worked for me is embracing my own personal projects in a way and my own hobbies. Like for instance, I like making analog music on my synthesizer. It has a MIDI port. And then I was like, hey, what if I can connect that MIDI port to my browser or to my computer in general? And it all started from there. And then I started thinking, what else is there? So for me, it's about having a way to learn, but also combine it with my own interests. Like in this case, it was a hobby, music, and then suddenly you have a project. So my advice would be play around with whatever hobbies you have, and maybe you can attach them somewhere on the browser in a way, whatever that way might be. So yeah.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. I feel like we've covered quite a bit. Are there any other APIs you wanted to touch on in particular, just real quick before we move on to our kind of lightning round here?
Don't think so. Not really.
No sweat.
I have a
Okay,
couple of ideas that I do have, but that we'll
Yeah.
see in the next time.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, we'll do the follow-up episode on those. Maybe things will have changed at that
Perfect.
point. Let's do our quick round. So, as of late, what is the weirdest website you've come across?
It always is the same one. TheUselessWeb.com. That website started it all for me a lot of years ago. You click a button, you get sent to a useless random website, and whatever that website is, you have no idea, and you get to do something, and it's lovely. I love
It's like Stumble Upon of old, but it's only weird stuff. Yeah, it's good. If you could have one ridiculous feature in every browser, what would it be?
Oh God. What if a browser could read your biometrics?
Heart rate monitor.
Yeah, exactly. Detect if you're stressed or you have an elevated heart rate, something like that. You could inject that in some variable in JavaScript, CSS, whatever, and slightly change the web user's experience. Like, for instance, maybe alter the looks or tones a little bit down and maybe change less neon colors and more pastel colors or something like that. We don't want that in the browser because we don't want to give our browsers and all websites our biometrics.
Mozilla will have something to say about this.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a fun idea, and I think it could be fun.
Oh, for sure. maybe that one needs a permissions check to be sure.
Yeah,
this website would like to access your heart rate data.
Yeah,
would you like
exactly.
to? Yeah. Okay, next one. Finish the sentence. The web would be boring without
JavaScript. JavaScript is a tool that makes this all possible for us as developers to basically code whatever we dream of in the browser or anywhere else these days. So yeah, definitely JavaScript.
Nice. Agreed. What's your go-to way to make coding fun when you are stuck?
Implement other features. I had this one time when I was working, for instance, on AstraDB and Astra Studio that just occurred to me. And I was implementing like a basic marketplace system. And I was stuck on some API or something. And suddenly, like the day after it, I went to review my progress. And suddenly I've built a whole like social media network with where you could do feeds and likes and comments and following in that marketplace. And in the end, I had to scrap it all, of course, because that wasn't the feature that we needed. But in a way, I understood the code base better. I knew where everything was and positioned better. And I had a lot of fun. And I explored, in a way, future possibilities of maybe that platform. So yeah.
That's the end of our lightning round questions. Is there any other kind of closing remarks here? Anything you'd like to leave listeners with?
Not really. You use the platform and abuse the platform whenever you want.
Yeah, try to break stuff.
Exactly. Break stuff and learn from it.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on and chatting about the weird corners of the web. It's been a pleasure, Elian.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me as well.
Nice. Take it easy.